All right, good evening. It's good to be together again. We are going to take a look, as you've seen in the reading here, the first part of chapter 17 of Revelation. We're getting to that section in the book, especially chapters 17 and 18. I probably should have included 16 in this as well. That it gets a little bit intricate. Now, we'll talk tonight. It is not that intricate, but it's leading up to a couple of chapters that are quite intricate, and in fact all the way through chapter 20 we see some technicalities that are a little more challenging to understand, and I thought it much better to do this on a Sunday evening where we can stop at times and take some questions and work some things out if there's misunderstandings or things like this. Tonight, I don't know how much of that will be necessary because this is going to be a little different way that I'm going to present this part of the lesson. We're looking at those first 7 verses, and as you have seen, the emphasis is on this woman who sits upon a beast, and she's filled with all kinds of immoralities and gaudiness and those sorts of things. And it is important for us to understand what is happening here. So catch you up, because it's been a few weeks. We saw, obviously, a beast rising up out of the sea in chapter 13 of Revelation. This beast corresponded easily to the 4th beast of the vision that Daniel had in Daniel chapter 7. Daniel had seen 4 beasts come up out of the sea, and each of those beasts were identified. You first had the Babylonian Empire, then the Medes and Persians and that empire, and then the Greek Empire, and then finally the Roman Empire being the 4th empire, in which during that time God would set up his kingdom, which would crush and destroy all other kingdoms. In Daniel 7, he speaks especially of this 4th empire, which corresponds to the Roman Empire. Diverse beasts, different from all the others in many different ways. This beast would conquer the world, but especially this beast was different in regard to the fact that this beast would go on a terror of trying to destroy God's kingdom by destroying God's people and God's followers. Now, you don't really see that exactly in the Babylonian, Persian, and Greek empires. There's not a world empire edict that says, let's get all the people who are moral, or let's destroy all of them. So this beast is much different. It attacks in every kind of way to destroy God's saints, and that's how God refers to them in Daniel chapter 7. But one like the Son of Man rises up, ascends into heaven, sits upon the throne, and there is given him power and dominion and a kingdom that will last forever. And he puts judgment on this beast and crushes and destroys the beast, and the saints reign forever and ever. And that is the picture of Daniel, Daniel 7. And we can even just hear those words and realize, though the beast has been destroyed, that would have been referred to as that 4th empire, that fullness of Christ conquering has not yet happened. Remember that we are told both in the Psalms and the quotations that we see in Revelation 12 and by the Lord himself in Matthew 22, that he will reign until all enemies are put under his feet. Now, I want you to note that very carefully. He is going to reign till all enemies are put under his feet, which means his enemies still exist in this world. The last enemy to be destroyed is death, which means that hasn't been destroyed, which means the enemies are present around us. And it's important then that as we look at this persecuting beast that is being destroyed, that we also understand that this judgment of the beast and the great prostitute that sits upon the beast is not the finality. It is a picture of what was taking place then and what would continue to take place at other times as these empires or nations or even cities rise up to try to conquer God's people and God's ways. So we'll see how that is developed here in that regard. Now, in chapter 15 and 16, recall that 7 angels came out from the throne carrying 7 bowls of wrath. And they pour out those bowls upon the beast and destroy the beast. And the 7th one that's poured out, destroys the city. There's a great earthquake and it all falls apart. And there is the end of it. And we see the words, Babylon the Great is fallen, referring then to Rome and its empire. It is fallen. And then we see, though, as we come to chapter 17, that the scripture actually begins with, in 17, the end of verse 1, when John is told, "Come, I will show you the judgment of the great prostitute who is seated on many waters." The Lord wants us to see this great prostitute that sits upon the beast that he has been talking about that is now destroyed. Now there's one thing that just completely comes to mind here. When I was reading and studying this, I thought to myself, well, why? You've already shown us the destruction of the beast. You've already just shown us that it's going to fall. Why not just go right on to our victory and show us the end in chapter 20 and show us the victory of the saints in chapters 20 and 21? Why not just go straight there? Well, the reason is I think pretty obvious, because the Lord wants us to be warned of what this great prostitute looks like. She's not the first empire city, nation city prostitute to stand upon the earth and to try to deceive the world. She's not the first, as we're going to see a little later in the lesson. There's at least 4 other prostitutes in the Old Testament that are city nations that are referred to. This is not the first time we see this, nor is it the last. This is Satan's method. This is the way he goes about seducing the world. This is our battle. And we need to recognize it. Remember, Revelation is not written for people then, and that's the end of it, and we're just looking back and going, wow, that was really terrible. No, this is written so it shows us that this beast keeps rising back up, trying to destroy God and His ways. And so by the Lord giving us a descriptive picture of what the prostitute looks like, it is easy then to see, oh yes, alive and well. The same tactics are being used today as was used then and have been used. If you're any kind of historian and went to school when they taught history, it's a little barb there. If you were any kind of taught history, you would know that this has been something that has risen up time and time again throughout the history of the world. And so nothing surprises us here. Let's just understand and be able to then get a picture of this before we make our applications. Let's let the Lord give us a picture of this prostitute and how she allures people to drink the wine, as you will see there. Drink the wine, verse 2, of her sexual immorality and what she is doing. So the first thing we notice about the prostitute is he identifies her as being seated on many waters. You see that at the end of verse 1. She is seated on many waters. Now, what are the many waters? Well, you go skip down to verse 15, a part of this chapter we won't get to tonight. But you skip down to verse 15, and the angel says, "The waters that you saw where the prostitute is seated are peoples and multitudes and nations and languages." So we recognize easily, in other words, the prostitute has seduced the people and nations of the world. That's interesting. It should be interesting, right? It's not just one nation, it's nations. It's just not some people, it's the peoples of the world. They have been seduced into this. This is what Satan does. This is the way Satan handles it. We just haven't been given this same kind of picture, have we? We just look at it more individually as Satan tempts here, tempts there. We look out and we see the temptations, the sin that are all around. But God makes that a corporate temptation. In other words, a cultural temptation. This was, as I mentioned this morning, the challenge of Corinth. She got leavened with the Corinthian culture and adopted it into her worship. And she became very much like the city around her. Same thing goes on today. I've always been quite interested in watching over the past 60 years or so how our preachers and our people and all of us could preach so strongly against certain things and it just wouldn't change, and people in the church would just keep on doing it until it became unpopular in the world. And once it became unpopular in the world, well, everybody changed. And it was easy somehow for Christians to give up things that they didn't give up before. And I'd always scratch my head and go, wow, do we really follow the culture? It's just interesting to watch how we so easily are affected and seduced by the culture around us. So you see that there. Then secondly, with this prostitute, we see that he states here in verse 18. Well, the question is, who is it? The beast, we said, well, that's the Roman Empire. We saw that very clearly from Daniel. But who is this prostitute sitting on the beast? When you look at the very end of chapter 17, he says, and the woman that you saw is the great city that has dominion over the kings of the earth. I have read many who say, well, the great city that's reigning over this is referring to Jerusalem. And I'm like, what? I don't know how you could possibly get that out of there. Jerusalem never reigned over the cities of the earth. This is Rome. There's no question that this is Rome. In fact, compare that to verse 9. This calls for a mind with wisdom. The 7 heads are 7 mountains on which the woman is seated. I don't think there's any difficulty in understanding him identifying Rome. Rome sat on 7 mountains. And so everything he's saying here fits this in every way for us to see the picture of what this woman is like. And then we see also in verse 3, notice the words. He carried me away into the wilderness, and I saw a woman sitting on a scarlet beast that was full of blasphemous names. It had 7 heads and 10 horns. Remind you of anyone? Certainly. When you go back to Revelation 13 and the description of the beast looks just like it. Has full of blasphemous names and has 7 heads and 10 horns. And so she is looking just like the beast. The city of Rome is what is the center then of what this beast, this whole empire is about. And she must be destroyed along with the beast. But she is behind this. She is the one who is being pictured here. And she's identical to that beast that we see in Revelation 13. Notice how she's dressed when you look here in verse 4. Arrayed in purple and scarlet. That's royal attire. So she has power. She has power in the sense of political power and reigning over the world. She has that kind of power. And then she is pictured as adorned with gold and jewels and pearls. Wow, so she's alluring. She allures with her wealth. Look what you can have. Look what you can come to me and you can have this. And then in her hand is a golden cup. Woo. Wouldn't you like to drink from the golden cup as she holds it out? It's wonderful. Drink from my cup. I can give you all of these things. But then the Lord, in His description, reveals what this is, what is really behind this. You can understand now why He pictures her in a metaphorical way as a prostitute. He dresses gaudy, she puts herself all up to address and allure the eyes by the lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, and the pride of life. And she says, come to me and you can have all of these things. And so it is literally just a picture. This golden cup you can have. But then the Lord reveals what's in the golden cup. It's filled with abominations and impurities of her sexual immorality. Oh, it's disgusting what is inside. But everything is being offered. This is wonderful. This is great. You can have all of this. And this is then this picture of desire. She offers wealth. She offers power. She offers immorality. There's no restrictions on what she can do. She is the promoter of filth and worldliness. That's who she is. That's her description. Now, this is really, really great in the sense that it's opening our eyes to be able to see something that is difficult for us to see when we're in the midst of the trees and just living life day to day and not really paying a lot of attention. A lot of times, well, we see it, but we try to ignore it and live in our little world, hopefully not be affected by the immorality that is around us. And here is the Lord describing that for us so that we are aware of it. But there's one other picture that He gives in verse 5. On her forehead, she boldly announces, proudly announces, she's the mother of prostitutes and of earth's abominations. She is not at all ashamed of who she is and what she's the mother of all that is worldly and ungodly and immoral. She is the chief of all of them, which indicates for us that there are many others, as we have mentioned. And this also, she's a contrast to a woman we have already seen in Revelation. Remember back in chapter 12, we were introduced to a godly woman that had the sun and the moon and the stars around her, and she was with child, and she gave birth to a man-child who was to rule over the earth with a rod of iron. And her offspring was filled with those who kept the commandments of God and stood strong for God and had upon their foreheads the Father's name and the name of Jesus. They stood with this. Look at these two women. Look at the contrast of them. One is proud to announce her sexual immorality and her abominations. The other is proud to announce that they are owned by the Lord Jesus Christ, and they will announce that to the world, putting His name on their foreheads. It's quite the picture. Look at very quickly here, look at some of the other prostitutes that we read about in Old Testament Scripture. And I'll leave it to you for us not to go back and spend some time on this. Leave it to you to look at these texts because it really is quite interesting. The first of prostitutes that is mentioned is Nineveh, with the capital of the Assyrian Empire. She is the mistress of witchcraft and harlotry, of conquest and cruelty. Few empires have ever been as cruel as the Assyrian Empire, and as Nineveh was against those that she wanted to conquer. She used her witchcraft and everything to just absolutely destroy people in the world. Cruelty beyond our imagination in many ways. In fact, we have actually seen this recently, 1 year ago on October 7th, and how the terrorist group Hamas attacked innocent people in Israel. What they did in that attack is exactly what Assyria would do when they would go into a nation. horrifying things. Things that you would say a human being certainly couldn't do that to another human being, and yet that's what they did. This is Nineveh. It is the harlot of witchcraft and conquest and cruelty. Tyre is another harlot that's spoken of in Isaiah 23. She is a unique harlot. Her harlotry is of merchandise and commerce. She enriches herself by seducing the world with wealth and what you can have. Very, very similar to the kinds of things that we deal with today. Tyre is one that God destroyed simply because she's not one who goes out and destroys Christians. She's not one who goes out and tries to persecute people. She just makes money off of people and enriches herself by her immorality. Now, nothing wrong with making money, but it's wrong when it's used the way she used it, as an idol and a god, to lift herself up beyond everyone in the world. And then the third harlot spoken of in Scripture is Babylon, the harlot of wealth and pleasure. Isaiah 47, many other passages speak of this. Jeremiah would speak of this as well. And so the Babylon, she's a Babylon of harlot, of wealth, and pleasure especially. You want wealth and pleasure, Babylon is your harlot. And she seduces the world with that kind of wealth and pleasure. You remember that Israel wants to participate in, and for years tried to buy her off and be able to enjoy from her gods and things like that. And then, surprisingly, Jerusalem is referred to as a harlot in Ezekiel 16. She is a harlot of religion. She is seduced by the idols of the world. She is not satisfied with God, with Yahweh, and what He can provide for her. She wants what all the various gods will provide her. And so she sacrifices, she gives herself as a harlot would give herself in order to enrich herself with the desires that she wants, and not satisfied with what God has. And then, of course, we have seen here that Rome now is considered the mother of all harlots, the mother of prostitutes. So she is the one who in a way has reproduced this harlotry that takes place throughout the world, and she embodies all of these other harlots. And then we see in this the final picture of this prostitute, this great prostitute of Revelation 17. She is a drunk prostitute, and it's not hard to picture this woman. I looked online. There's all kinds of people who tried to draw this and paint this, and I didn't find anything that I thought was worth it to show you, because really in your head you can picture very, very clearly what this harlot looks like. And then on top of it all, she's staggering around drunk, and out of the side of her mouth is the blood of the saints. And I just think about what John, when he looked at that and he wrote that down and tried to get his brethren to see what this harlot really was about. See her ruling and reeling and then drooling out of her side of her mouth, the blood of the saints. What a horrible, horrible picture that is given here. Now, note carefully here that John marveled greatly into verse 6. John marveled greatly. Why do you think? Why do you think John looked at this and just was absolutely amazed at what he was seeing in the nature of this beast and this harlot city that he is looking at, and God describing it for you? I would suggest that that what John is especially marveling about is that it was difficult for him to equate what he's looking at in the vision with the Rome he's living in at the moment. You see, what we learn from chapter 3 and verse 10, when the Lord speaks to the city of Philadelphia, He said in these words, I'm going to keep you from the hour of trial that is about to come on the whole world. Mark that well. When Revelation was written, when John saw the visions, Rome was not the beast that it was about to become. Rome was not. In fact, we're going to read on down in verse 8 in our next lesson, hopefully, Lord willing, next Sunday night. We're going to see that the beast who you saw was and is not, and is about to rise. You see those words there in verse 8? The beast was, at present he is not, and he's about to rise, future. And it would have been probably difficult for John to see what this beast looks like and what this city of Rome actually is in the eyes of God. And when he gets this terrible picture, he's just marveled by it. Wow, really? This is it? What if this were a description of the United States of America? What if God sent us a message and says, here's the description. Here's what it really is in my sight. How many of us would believe it? How many of us would say, really? That bad? Is that really what you're seeing, Lord? And what he's showing us is not just what is, but what is about to rise. A beast that is vicious, a beast that has a harlot sitting on it that is going to seduce all the peoples and have blood of the saints drooling out of her mouth. Quite a picture in this harlot city that we see. So there's the description. What I would like to do now in the last few minutes is to try to help us recognize the danger of this prostitute. In other words, let's make an application for today and see the danger that is around us. The first thing we would notice here is she is, as we mentioned, a contrast to the woman of chapter 12, who was clothed the sun and the moon under her feet and a crown of 12 stars. A woman who produced an offspring who keep the commandments of God, and they conquer the dragon, remember, by the word of their testimony, by the blood of the Lamb, by the word of their testimony, and loving not their lives, even to death. What a different kind of people that comes from the woman of chapter 12 than the people who are coming from and being seduced by this prostitute here, who also are seduced by all the wealth and the gold and the silver and the sexual immorality that takes place. Later we see that this woman is pictured as a beautiful city, the New Jerusalem, coming down out of heaven in Revelation chapter 21. So we'll see two cities here, two women and two cities. So I want you to mark that well. We'll see it more with the second city, of course, later. But you have two women, two cities that are being contrasted. This is not new, as nothing in Revelation is new. It's borrowed from Old Testament pictures. When you go back to Isaiah 24 and 25, God speaks of a world city that is just like this city that he's referring to here, just like Rome. It's a world city. It's not just one place, it's the way the world acts. And she is pictured as a city who prostitutes herself in order to get people to worship and serve her and give her power and strength. But on the other hand, of course, there is God's city. And that's spoken of in Isaiah 25. And in God's city, there's peace and glory and holiness and beautifulness. And that city, of course, wins the battle at the end of the day. And so think of it here. Two women, one pure and holy and loyal to God, the other a prostitute seducing the world with her power and immoralities. Two cities the same way, one pictured as a holy bride for her bridegroom, and the other pictured as the mother of all harlots. There's your world. There's your world. I marvel when I think about it, just like John did. I just kind of step back and marvel. Wow, that's how God sees it. That's the world God is looking at. That is the enemy. And we need to recognize it very, very clearly. Now notice also the emphasis here that is used with sexual immorality. There's a metaphor that is used, of course, with that word. We see it in verse 2. Drunk with the wine of her sexual immorality. We see it again in verse 4, where she has a cup full of abominations and the impurities of her sexual immorality. We see it again in verse 5, where she is spoken of as the mother of prostitutes and earth's abominations. All of these things picturing her then with this metaphor of sexual immorality. And I think we need to ask the question, what really does that mean? What does it mean that the kings of the earth and the peoples and the multitudes and the nations and the languages, down in verse 15, have been seduced by this prostitute to serve her and to give themselves to her? Let's see if we can figure that out so that we don't fall into the same kind of picture. First off, there is a likeness, just as any metaphor, there is a likeness to the physical sin. There have been many times in which I have been a part of trying to help a man or a woman who had been the victim of sexual immorality by their spouse, and help them through that pain and that process. And one of the most difficult things to come into to be able to grasp in our minds, that in that particular case, one's mate has found something that they could not find any other place. A pleasure and a magic carpet ride, I call it. A magic carpet ride that cannot be discovered with following God. And you say, well, following God is the greatest of all. Yes, it is. But it is discovered not through an explosion of July 4th rocket ships that take off and all of that. It is found in a much different and fulfilling way. It is not something temporary. It is not something that just sends you to the moon for a moment. But people who fall prey to this, whether it is literal sexual immorality or the sexual immorality that is offered by the world around us, we tend to think that we have found something that is so special that it just couldn't be found anyplace else. And that is why many who fall into this never recover. As Proverbs 2:17 says, the one who goes into her never returns. They're never able to actually get their life back the way it was. They suffer the consequences of it forever. King David, as we're going to be studying in 2 Samuel, is a perfect picture of that. By the time we get to chapter 12 and his immorality with Bathsheba, the rest of the book is a horror show. He suffers and suffers till the end of his life because of that one incident that took place. This is the picture that is going on here. In falling to this, we become just like Eve, seeing the tree and the fruit and the desires of the flesh and the eyes and the pride that can be had, all of the desires that are inside of us, we can somehow shortcut and have in a moment's notice. That is the picture that he is giving here. The woman folly is recorded in Proverbs chapter 9, verses 13 to 18. She's a perfect picture of what this worldly prostitute offers. Put the text up on the screen here. Take a look at it in your own Bible if you like, obviously. The woman folly is loud, she is seductive and knows nothing. She sits at the door of her house. She takes a seat on the highest places of the town, calling to those who pass by, who are going straight on their way. Whoever is simple, let him turn in here. And to him who lacks sense, she says, stolen water is sweet, and bread eaten in secret is pleasant. But he does not know that the dead are there, that her guests are in the depths of Sheol. Look at some of the words here that are important to highlight in this. She's loud and seductive. She drowns out anything else opposing. She is seductive, even though she knows nothing. But she tries to seduce. She takes her seat in the highest places of the town. She's not a nobody. She's someone that is able to get the attention of everyone around. And here's her message. Stolen water is sweet. Bread eaten in secret is pleasant. See what I mean by a magic carpet ride? She's advertising, you can find something with me that you can find no other place. God doesn't offer what I offer. Seduces the world, seduces us, causes us to want to taste that. What's that like? Just like Eve. Maybe I need to eat that. Maybe I need to taste that. Maybe that's where this is. She is so seductive that it's in the beginning, it's almost unnoticed. And then pretty soon it takes over and we're captured by the lust of our eyes. Our advertisements and television sets and all this blast in our mind over and again. Look, if you have this. Car commercials are the best, aren't they? Why, if you drove this $100,000 car, you would just go to the moon. It would just be fantastic. And it would especially be fantastic when you spent $500,000 fixing the crazy thing because you had to take it to such a fancy place. No, we're not talking about that part of it. We're not going to tell you that we really make all of our money out of fixing your car. We're not going to tell you that. We're going to tell you it is a magic carpet ride. It's everything. And that goes on in so many other particular areas. You know, the Apostle Paul, twice he uses the word flee. Flee. Flee idolatry, flee sexual immorality. Only two sins he used that word with. Why? I call them potato chip sins. Bet you can't eat just one. He knows full well you take the first bite and you're going to want more. The danger that has taken place here is beyond anything that we can imagine, and we need to stay away from it. Read an article recently. One of the digital news organizations, Daily Caller, has produced a video series of in-depth research they have done on the mental degradation of our society through pornography that is now at a touch away to 8-year-olds, 9-year-olds, 10-year-olds. I can't even imagine what's happening to their brain by the time they're 17 or 18 years old and what is taking place. And they have done research on what is taking place. And it is horrifying. Used to, their blurb in the tease was, you had to go out of your house to find any of this. And if you were too young, you couldn't go out. You had to steal it from daddy or whatever. And now, oh man. It is always available. And the brain is just being absolutely destroyed. Stay away from this and all the other lusts that come around, because it's pictured the same way. Proverbs chapter 7, 6 through 27 gives a physical picture of the nature of this seduction. He's talking specifically, of course, about a woman here, but the picture is the same picture of any kind of lust or desire. Just note one thing particularly at the end of this. In verse 21 of Proverbs 7, with much seductive speech, she persuades him. With her smooth talk, she compels him. What goes on with all desires that are presented to us? Yeah, smooth speech, seductive speech, persuasive speech. All at once, he follows her. As an ox goes to the slaughter, as a stag is caught first, till the arrow pierces its liver, as a bird rushes into a snare, he does not know that it will cost him his life. And now, O sons, listen to me, be attentive to the words of my mouth. Let not your heart turn aside to her ways. Do not stray in her paths, for many a victim she has laid low, and all her slain are mighty throng. Her house is the way to Sheol, going down to the chambers of death. That is the picture. That's the characteristics that we see here with the prostitute of Rome and any other city prostitute that is given. Look what these characteristics of her offer. She says, accept my religious and idolatrous demands. I'll give you security, money, and ultimate pleasure. And by the way, don't you dare rebuke me or expose me as being sinner, or I will destroy you. Don't you do that. Oh, that threat is before us very, very strongly today. That threat is there. Do not rebuke my adulterous ways. Do not do that. Why did Israel make a golden calf and Ashtaroth and Baal worship? Why did they do those things? Because there's three main reasons why idolatry is so important. One, an idol doesn't rebuke us. There's no restrictions. I'm the creator of the idol, so I can make it any way I want. It won't rebuke me because it doesn't exist. It can't stop me from doing it because it doesn't want to. And Yahweh's not going to give me what I really want when I want it. That's what I want. I want it when I want it. And we don't trust Yahweh to provide all of our desires, all of our real needs, the things we really want. He's not going to give those to us. So we need to dabble in some of the other prostitutes and sins and idolatry that takes place. Look at what James said. He's talking to Christians. What an amazing statement that he makes here. You ask and do not receive because you ask wrongly to spend it on your passions. Our passions are to be for God. And He will give us in His presence. We will have pleasures forevermore. That's where we go. Not for this world. That's where we go. And he says, you adulterous people. Can you imagine getting a letter as these churches got and calling us adulterous people? Wow. Do you not know that friendship with the world is enmity with God? Well, it's so easy to be religious and have some world friends. I'm not talking about people. I'm talking about objects and desires and pleasures. And that makes us an enemy of God. How easy to be that way. We are in a very dangerous position living in a country that offers us anything we want at a moment's notice. Don't have enough money? It's okay. I don't have my credit card on me. Just pull that out. Don't have enough money? You can't do something you want to do? That's all right. You see it. American Express, everywhere I go, or Visa, or whatever. Click, a click, a click, a click, a click. You can do anything you want. Oh, it's just going to be great. You can have all that. Desire any of the sexual desires? Well, the golden calf can be worshipped. A punch of a button on the television, any one number of channels you can go and experience and enjoy that. And furthermore, you can just pursue all the things that Solomon talked about that were vanity. That is just whatever my eyes desired and did not keep from them. I kept my heart from no pleasure, and thus was my reward from all my toil. There it is. It's exactly what we have at our fingertips today. How dangerous. Be warned. Be warned. It is all there like a flood. The wealth is flowing into our lives. Let me note something, especially for those of you who are younger. That as little as 30 years ago, the average person could not live the way you're living right now. Could not be in a home that you see around us that many just average workers are able to live in. I remember going to my grandma and grandpa's house. Oh, what a wonderful house. About 700 feet and 2 bedrooms and 1 bath. Marvelous little home. Never thought a thing about it. Grandma and Grandpa were rich. Man, that was fantastic. Do you know what's happened in between? Our government has printed and borrowed $36 trillion. You have no idea how much money that is, and I don't either. It's beyond imagination. That's why we're rich. It's a false wealth. And like one of those games where you put the wood all in and then you start pulling it out, I forget what it's called. And one of these times, one of them will be pulled out and the whole thing will come down. We're not spending real money. And the wealth is false. And it's not just America doing it. The entire world, the governments of the world are doing it. I saw the other day something shocking. China itself was hemorrhaging so badly in their economy that they did, one of those omnibus bills where they spent more money and threw money out in their economy to build it up. Let's just print. And it feels like we're wealthy, but we are not. Every politician knows that our false feeling of wealth is what gets them elected, and on top of that, getting rid of moral boundaries makes everybody feel like I can do whatever I want without consequences. That is unsurvivable. Absolutely unsurvivable. If I were doing a commercial right now, I would say, store some food. You have no idea how easily it can all end. Now listen to the words of Jeremiah 40, verse 30 and 31. This is Israel, the prostitute. Final 2 verses, text here. And you, O desolate one, referring to Israel, she's trying to save herself one last moment before she's destroyed. O desolate one, what do you mean that you dress in scarlet, that you adorn yourself with ornaments of gold, and that you enlarge your eyes with paint? We call that makeup today, right? In vain you beautify yourself. Your lovers despise you. They seek your life. For I heard a cry as of a woman in labor anguish, as of one giving birth in her first child. To her first child. The cry of a daughter of Zion, gasping for breath, stretching out her hands. She's almost dead. All the prostitution she had done before is now coming down on her. She'd given herself to the nations, and now the nations are done with her. She's worn out. They're going to destroy her, and she's like a woman who is about to give birth and is not going to survive. Zion gasping for breath, stretching out her hands. Woe is me, I am fainting before murderers. From the beginning, these nations, their desires was destroy Israel. And they just used her until she was used up. And the nations of the world look at the same thing when it comes to us. Final text. This is the Babylon of old and what God says about her. Now therefore hear this, you lover of pleasures, who sit securely, who say in your heart, I am, and there is no one beside me. I shall not sit as a widow or know the loss of children. Nobody will conquer me. These two things shall come to you in a moment, in one day. The loss of children and widowhood shall come upon you in full measure, in spite of your many sorceries and the great power of your enchantments. You felt secure in your wickedness. You said, no one sees me. Your wisdom and your knowledge led you astray, and you said in your heart, I am, and there is no one beside me. But evil shall come upon you, which you shall not know how to charm away. Disaster shall fall upon you, for which you shall not be able to atone. And ruin shall come upon you suddenly, of which you know nothing. It is pretty shocking that people are running for office today who literally stand up and say, we need to abuse our children. We need to allow every kind of sexual immorality. We need to show our children pornography and every kind of thing. We need to murder unborn babies. And they stand up and say, vote for me and I'll make it happen. You don't have to be very old to know that's shock. That's nuts. That's what we're looking at. Does that text remind you of anybody? I see America written all over that text. I am, and there's none beside me. Nobody can conquer me. God will later say, I'm going to make your military like women. Try that in hand-to-hand combat. Not going to happen. We should be warned. The prostitute is alive and well. Well, with that wonderful note, let's sing a happy song. We're not going to stand for that. We're going to stand for God. And we have on our foreheads His name and the name of the Father. Glorious thing. And we will. God's kingdom will be victorious. Let's stand and sing.